I'm on. Oh, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to one of these final History at Home lessons that I'm going to be bringing you today from the Old Baldy Foundation. Of course, my name is Travis Gilbert, and I've been the educator and collections coordinator here at the Old Baldy Foundation. And before I leave here at the end of the week and conclude my duties at North Carolina's oldest standing lighthouse, we thought that we would share with you some of my favorite pieces in our collections, and on Thursday at 2 o'clock take you out into the field and show you some of my favorite places and hear some of the stories that I've come to really cherish over the nearly 3 years that I've spent here at the Old Baldy Foundation. So when we talk about my favorite things, something that I think over the past few years people have been really shocked to learn is how many pieces of artifacts and manuscripts and textiles and photographs are within the Old Baldy Foundation's collections. We have a facility that is located off campus, meaning that it is not located here at the Keeper's Cottage or at the Lighthouse and its grounds. It's an off-campus facility where we house all of our collections. Now, we've slowly but surely been doing an inventory. You might be surprised that there was once upon a time where the Old Baldy Foundation understood what they owned that had immense historical significance, but for some of the smaller, more obscure items in our collections, there maybe were many unanswered questions. So slowly but surely, over the past few years, we've been answering more questions, and we believe now that if you were to count every piece of paper, every artifact, every photograph, there are certainly pushing near 2,500 pieces that the Old Baldy Foundation is responsible for, part of our mission. And collectively, these pieces in our collections help tell the story of Baltic Island's historical significance. And I thought today I would share with you 5 pieces from our collections that have really kind of hit home for me, that I've really come to cherish and come to treasure, and I think collectively they help tell the broader picture here at the Old Baldy Foundation. And I want to thank my partner in crime here behind the camera, one of many folks who have put up with all of my eccentric behavior over the past few years. That, of course, is McCallie Gibbons, and I'm sure she'll be reading off any comments that we have from the Facebook Live. So if you're out there listening, give us a shout out in the comments. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. If you're a repeat offender, as I would say, let us know how you got involved in the Old Baldy Foundation and our History at Home series that began back when this pandemic began. So let's dig into the archives. So I think one of my favorite pieces, and something that immediately was immediately revered by the Old Baldy Foundation, and that was expressed when I started this position, was the pen and ink drawing of the original lighthouse. And this was drawn around July of 1806. And it represents one of the only depictions we are aware of North Carolina's oldest lighthouse. And that is the lighthouse that was finished by 1794, 1795, sometime around the holiday season or turn of the year, on Baldy Island. So this is before Old Baldy Lighthouse. This was the lighthouse that predates Old Baldy, and again was the state's first lighthouse. That's why we call Old Baldy the state's oldest standing lighthouse, because again she has an older sister, it being the lighthouse depicted in this pen and ink drawing. And not only does the drawing depict the original lighthouse, as we refer to her. It also depicts the original keeper's cottage. And we can assume that the bricks from the original lighthouse were deconstructed in 1813 due to the encroaching beach and recycled. So some of those bricks from this original lighthouse that was deconstructed were recycled to build what we know as Old Baldy today. So there's a little piece of this original lighthouse within Old Baldy that we can treasure, we can touch today. And why this is my favorite piece in terms of the lighthouse history, or one of them, is because when I arrived here, there was this clear understanding that we are a nonprofit organization tasked with preserving and interpreting Old Baldy Lighthouse, North Carolina's oldest standing lighthouse, right? But who was responsible for interpreting North Carolina's other lighthouses that once called the Lower Cape Fear home, whose light graced these shorelines? And to me, as an interpreter, the logical conclusion was it was the Old Baldy Foundation. If we were responsible for the lighthouse that has remained, we should be responsible for the lighthouses that have been lost to time that once graced the shorelines of the Lower Cape Fear. And there were, once we took on that mission a little more institutionally and thoroughly and in writing, it amazed me at how many misconceptions there were about these three lighthouses. The original lighthouse, Old Baldy, and then the third and final lighthouse, Cape Fear Light Station, built in 1903 and deconstructed, like the original lighthouse, in 1958. That one stood out towards the Bald Head Island Conservancy. We still hear it today, although I don't think it is as prolific as it once was years ago. Ideas that people think that Old Baldy's the oldest lighthouse, or that Old Baldy was moved from the site at the Bald Head Island Conservancy that was actually Cape Fear Light Station, or just simply that Old Baldy was the one and only lighthouse that ever was on Bald Head Island. So artifacts such as this pen and ink drawing are not only significant because they depict artistically what our state's oldest lighthouse looked like, but it also helps share with our community the broader history of lighthouses in the Lower Cape Fear that are all represented symbolically with the one that has remained, the one that you can still climb, and that is Old Baldy Lighthouse.
So while you're changing out, I'll give some readouts. Don Taylor says, "Hey Travis, thank you for all you've done to share and preserve BHI and Old Baldy's history." Kara Ford said, "Hey Travis, wishing you the best at your new position." Mike Hall said he will miss you. And Emmeline Winters said, "We're here, so thankful that you're here to share and learn. Congratulations, thrilled to see you in March in Wilmington."
Those are some great comments, and thank you for all those kind words, everybody. Emmeline and I had a chance to speak over the Christmas holiday on the phone. I reached out, and it was a nice conversation, and I won't be too far away, so we'll have to have that porch chat when you're visiting Bald Head next. That'll entice me to come back. And Kara, I can't thank you and Jace enough for all your kindness that you shared with me, and this microphone that I'm going to pass down to the next educator and to McCallie so they can get great use out of it and share the gospel that is the Old Baldy Foundation. And then, of course, Don and Mike, thank you both again for all your support and everything you've done. Specifically, Don, it's been an honor to really share the story of your ancestors and to experience you coming down and stood where your ancestors served our country as lighthouse keepers. That's one of those days that'll go with me for a very long time. It kind of gives me goosebumps. So thank you all for tuning in. So it wouldn't be no surprise, the second out of my 5 favorite objects in the Old Baldy Foundation collection is this button. and it represents the 57th Regiment of Foot. And this was a British officer's button, and it fell off of his coat when he served his country or his king here on Bald Head Island sometime in the spring of 1776. And not only does it really represent the military history of this island, because all jokes aside, when I was hired for this job, I didn't necessarily know that much about lighthouses, and I will be honest with you, lighthouses weren't extremely thrilling for me. They grew on me, absolutely grew on me. Now I love lighthouses, but when I first started, it was like, oh, I'm going to be interpreting a lighthouse. This ought to be good. And then Chris Webb and all these others shared with me all the military history on this island. And if you know me, military history is really what excites me as an interpreter. So when they pulled out the buttons from the Revolutionary War like this, and buttons from the Civil War, and helmets from World War II, and they were like, oh my goodness, there might have been a gas attack during World War I, and I mean, all that military history really sold me and got me more and more excited about some of the other topics. And so that's what this button represents. And it also just represents, I think, this idea of how such a small act, even an accident of sorts, might change history and have ripples generations and decades and centuries later. And that's what this button for me represents. Something so simple and so accidental and inconsequential, like somebody dropping a button, like I might have done plenty of times over on my tours out here, could be lost and not really thought about or dwelt upon by the individual who lost the button. But then in 1986, right, McCallie? 1986, when an archaeologist shovel or hand scooped this up, it was so consequential. It was life-changing. It was altering to the mission of the Old Baldy Foundation, because now we knew exactly which regiment was stationed here at Bald Head Island, one of many of part of the British invading force in the spring of 1776. We could prove, because the written word is not very substantial, it's not very conclusive on what the British did here, when they came, necessarily why they landed on Bald Head Island. We can make some educated guess, but this button filled in the gaps where the written history let us question. And again, something so inconsequential like dropping a button having such large repercussions. So this is a button that I will miss getting the opportunity to hold, and maybe if I ask really, really nicely when I come back and visit, McCallie will let me pull out this button once again for a donation, I imagine, this time around.
So a few more people said, Mark Prack said, hey Travis, we're going to miss you. Don't be a stranger. Susan said, greetings from Annapolis. Thank you for sharing the wonders of BHI and Old Baldy through your Facebook live sessions last year. You will be missed, and wishing you the best of luck. We got Susan Park saying congratulations and how incredible you guys have done. All nice things about you.
Yeah, Mark, the president that I've had the honor to serve under on our board of directors. Mark, thank you for everything that you've done for the organization and for your leadership over the years. And Susan Park and all y'all, thank you again for all your kind comments. Y'all have made this a wonderful journey and a wonderful experience. So I'm going to pull out this next object. This is the third of the fifth of my favorite. So this is a Plat Map, and it's oyster claims on Shell Beach. So this is from the late 19-teens into the early 1920s. It was written in April of 1915 specifically, when Bald Head Island was known as Palmetto Island. So through the videos, y'all know that Bald Head Island has gone through many names. It just adds to the confusion, like the idea that there are at minimum 3 lighthouses we get to talk about here, not just the one that you see. When folks come over here, they know they're coming to Bald Head Island. That's what it says on the ferry and all the signs, but then they hear about Palmetto Island and Smith Island and Shell Island and Cape Island and Cedar Island, and they're like, well, where are all these different islands? And then there's Middle Island and Bluff Island and Buzzards Bay, and all of a sudden, and they don't realize they're all synonyms. It's all one and the same, basically. Or if you want to look even more geographically with precision, it all represents the island complex, Bald Head Island being one of many. So in the 1920s or 19-teens, when this map was created, it was known as Palmetto Island. It was a marketing ploy, as we've discussed. So this, for me, not only shows you, well, first of all, there are tons of maps in our collection. There are maps that represent the Civil War, maps that represent different construction projects, but for this represents of what could have been on Bald Head. So why I fell in love with the island, I think my first night on Bald Head Island, I got the pleasure of taking a hour-and-a-half joyride around midnight with Wendy Wilmot out to Captain Charlie's and through the Maritime Forest. And it was amazing, how dark it was, and how much of a wilderness it was. How much of the landscape was preserved. My goodness, I felt like it was in a jungle, and I'll never forget it. And I've never taken that for granted being on Bald Head today. So we all love Bald Head Island because of how the developers have preserved the landscape and tried to marry creating a world-class community here on the beach with preserving the natural ecology of this island. They understood that it's the nature that's what makes Bald Head Island so special. And this map shows you how so many times in history that could have all been lost. Like in the late 19-teens and early 20s, it came so close to being lost. We could be looking at a completely different Bald Head Island. We could be looking at Myrtle Beach right now if this map came to fruition. And again, there were so many other times in history, like 1971, 1978, where, again, just like this map depicts, we came so close to losing this gorgeous piece of beach and of Barrier Island to development. But it wasn't meant to be, and thank goodness it didn't. Now, this map also is a favorite of mine because it represents one of the biggest challenges that we face at Old Baldy. So our archival facility, which is a warehouse that spatially it works. We have enough space to work with, but it's the materials inside that we have been slowly but surely acquiring better materials that are proper for the preservation of your collections. These are your collections. This is a nonprofit. We're just the stewards of your history. Well, if you can look here, we have this in a protective film, but this map, once upon a time, was all folded up. And the creases of where it used to be folded up are starting to crack. So when I found this collection, many of our maps were all folded up. And immediately we had to flatten them. And when you flatten a crease that's been folded up for years and years and years, many times they rip. And you quite literally are ripping essential pieces of our island community's history. So a challenge for the staff moving forward is not only pulling out maps that we haven't gotten to and pulling them out and flattening them, getting protective, proper plastic so we can encase and enclose what has remained. But finding a drawer that is fireproof in case the unexpected and unimaginable would happen, that is large enough, a drawer that is fireproof, that is large enough that these maps can be stored now and forever flat. So no more creases cause no more tears and no more rips, and we don't have to go through an even greater expense of finding a paper conservator to repair these tears. It's a large expense at the moment to create to find and purchase a fireproof flat map case, but in the long run, the conservator's bills are going to rack up if you continue to allow these maps to be folded up and these creases to cause tears. And this is something that is pervasive with our maps. We've done a good job protecting currently the maps that are the most valuable in our collections, like this developer's map from 1915 that shows what could have been. But there's a lot more progress to come.
Nobody else has really commented, but we've got a lot of new viewers on here.
So the next piece I want to show shows us a challenge that we've overcome. Through hard work, through absorbing knowledge from professionals. So if I showed you the maps, a challenge that we have yet to overcome, this is a challenge that we have thoroughly overcome thanks to a lot of help and a lot of guidance. So this is our circa 1882-83 Lighthouse keeper's uniform. And this is my fourth favorite collection item because it, I think, represents personally for me professional development. So my first year on the job, a little friend called Hurricane Florence came to visit in September of 2018. And she was supposed to be a Category 5 hurricane. And thankfully, she weakened to a Category 1. But unthankfully, she stuck around way longer than she was kind of welcome to. And she dumped 30 inches of rain on us in a matter of 2 or 3 days. And when I evacuated the collections, I was a little inexperienced and thinking on my feet. Now, fortunately, I did think on my feet. Fortunately, I was capable of coming here and doing what I thought was best, which was certainly better than nothing at all. However, back to the button in the military history, I spent time evacuating the items that excited and interested me first, rather than thinking, rather than divorcing my thoughts on what history was important and what history was unimportant. I could not do that. Just wasn't professionally there yet. So in the grand scheme of things, we laugh about it. I was evacuating 150-pound solid iron cannonballs because I love the Civil War, before I thought about evacuating a wool 1882 Lighthouse keeper's uniform. Well, because there wasn't a disaster preparedness plan, and because I was thinking on my feet, and because we're on a barrier island with no bridge, and I had a personal house and life to think about, of course I ran out of time. And this was left behind. And when 30 inches of rain fell on Belted Island, this grew mold, and when we came back, and I found this pitiful state of a uniform, it was heartbreaking, and I immediately learned my lesson. Not only was it a mistake on my part, it was also a poor investment in our collections. There was a homemade case that this uniform lived in, and that case just was not adequate. It was not up to professional standards. It was homemade, so it could not adequately protect this invaluable collections item. So my first phone call was Adrienne Burney, who works for North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. And panically, I said, what on earth do I do? And thankfully, she said, you need to find a cooler and you need to freeze it. And Claude Pope at the Maritime Market allowed us to put it in his freezer. Island's all about collaboration. And then, thankfully, we were able, through the state, to find Lynn Lancaster Gorges, a collections conservator from New Bern, North Carolina, the Tryon Palace. I volunteer. See, volunteering is always a good thing, people. Always volunteer. Find a local nonprofit and volunteer, because if I had not been a volunteer at Tryon Palace, I would have not been able to have the personal connections to ask their staff, where do I go to find a textile conservator? And 10 seconds, they're like, oh, you need to go to Lynn. So we took it to Lynn, she conserved it, and then through, again, more networking, we were able to find a grant through a partnership between the North Carolina Museums Council and the North Carolina Preservation Consortium. And through that grant monies, they not only funded, they did not fund to conserve this. This was through FEMA monies. But they were able to partially fund this beautiful new case and mannequin that is archival quality and could protect this piece if, I don't know, there's no water in this building, but if, I don't know, something really terrible happened. We've evacuated this now twice because of hurricanes. There's one every year, so we've got plenty of practice. But not only were those two nonprofits able to help us by the grant money, but several island residents do networking, including, just to name a few, John Monroe and the BHI guys, the podcast, and Stephen Kristen Henson through Henson Building Corporation. All their generosity came together to buy our community this case. So once this came home, and that was a proud day when I brought this baby home, we put her in the nice, beautiful, proper case. This was an expensive endeavor, but it was a true, valuable investment in our history. And now what the final piece of the cake was, we took everything I learned through this process, brought on to our team another collections professional, and we were able to write down, or at least begin writing down, what it is that I did right, what it is that I did wrong in Hurricane Florence. And because of where we are in Hurricane Alley, we were not only able to test out that plan once, we were able to test out that plan twice during hurricanes. They're all running together now. Dorian in 2019 and Isaias in 2020. So with a new educator working with McCallie and the rest of our staff, they have at least begun to understand what it is that it takes and the time that it takes to properly secure our invaluable collections here on Bald Head Island and make sure that they are around for generations to come. So this uniform really represents professional growth for myself over the years. And I tell you what, I'm rewarded every day, because this summer we sit out this door, not this summer, this fall, we sit outside this door because of COVID precautions. And McCallie can testify to this. When people open up that door, the first thing they see is that uniform. And immediately the kids are like, oh, wow, a uniform. It's like constant all day. And at least the one field trip that we squeaked in before the pandemic, the uniform was a hit. It's a tangible way. Clothing and textiles, people can really connect to what you wear, because we all wear clothing. No matter who you are, what your experiences are, we all wear clothing. So you're able to connect to the past, especially with children. So I'm very glad that that's protected for future generations to come.
Yeah.
All right.
So Chuck Hughes says, hey Travis, congratulations, you'll be missed. Christina says, you let our son Joseph volunteer to help you, and he learned so much looking through BHI articles. We will never forget it.
Absolutely, yeah. If Joseph is doing well, I remember those when they were, McCallie, I was even before you, when we, all those subject files, that's another professional growth. So it was like boxes and boxes of just random papers, and I all knew it was valuable. It was just there was no system to it. So I knew it was way overwhelming for me. I'd still be doing it if I didn't have help. So we brought all these people, a variety of ages, and over several days, hours of work that went into this, We organized them all by subjects and scanned them, and now they're on our website. And we have school children calling, and we tell them to go to the subject files. We have a lady working on a manuscript for the Generator Society using them. Just an incredible project that brought our community together, and they're up there, and that'll never go away. That's another example, just like the uniform, that's preserved for generations to come. We could lose those papers tomorrow, but we still have them digitally, and that's thanks to all of you out there. So the last piece of the 5 I wanted to share, my favorite pieces or things from the collections, is this construction cap. So this kind of represents the idea that once we began organizing everything, that organizations' collections are ever-changing. They're like a human. They're alive. They're constantly expanding. Sometimes we lose things, sometimes we gain things, but it really is my hope that the individuals that are in charge of this collection going forward are now able to take artistic license. Now that everything is at least somewhat organized. We're not there yet. There's still a lot of work to be done. But we have a great idea of what we have, and it syncs up with our interpretive plan. What we are responsible for collecting. What fits and what doesn't fit. With that in writing now, and our board involvement with our board of directors collections committee and the staff who are helping those board members guide this process, the next generation of staff members, they can take artistic license and choosing what we collect going forward and bring our history to the present day. Because history was, when this video started, is now history. It doesn't ever stop. It's always moving forward. And this helmet, I think, represents my contribution to bringing our collections to the present day. This was the helmet that our executive director, Chris Webb, wore. You can see the International Chimney logo, and I learned, McCallie taught me, this is actually an old logo. It's outdated, so it's definitely historic now. But yes, our executive director, Chris Webb, wore this helmet when Old Baldy was getting her 200th birthday makeover, her preservation project in 2017. So, I mean, this is a great example of how you expand and bring the collections to the present day and get to curate what you preserve, because this was just sitting somewhere. It was sitting upstairs in the office, actually, now that I think about it. It was sitting upstairs on Chris's desk. And, it wasn't with the artifacts. It was just kind of sitting there because she wore it once, and it was kind of a memento to her time and her contributions to saving and preserving North Carolina's oldest standing lighthouse. And I said, "What are you doing with that?" And she goes, "I don't really know." So I said, we're gonna put this in the collection. So now it has a number, right, McCallie? It has a number. It's not photographed yet, but it's in our database. It's in our eHive. It's officially part of our history. So when there's an exhibit moving forward that talks about all the preservation work that Old Baldy has undergone, someone can display this helmet as a tangible reminder of all the energy, all the resources, all the time, the love, tear, and sweat that have gone to make sure that North Carolina's oldest standing lighthouse is preserved for years and years to come. So don't ever think that this job is done. This job didn't begin with me. It didn't end with me. This is never ending. It's perpetual, because we want to ensure that our history is codified, accessioned, and preserved as it occurs. And with the events of national significance that have occurred in the past days, weeks, and months, we can definitely understand why it's important to constantly be collecting artifacts to remind us of what moments of historical significance we are living in today. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I hope, and if you're listening to the future, leave a comment. We will get back to you. This was just a little smattering of my favorite things from the Old Baldy Foundation collections. I'm glad you could tune in and in videos past. And as a reminder, we'll come back and we'll take it out to the field on Thursday at 2 o'clock here at Facebook Live. We'll talk about my favorite places and recount some of my favorite stories that I've learned over the years. And as always, you can find this video, Thursday's video, and any videos past on our Old Baldy Foundation YouTube channel. So thanks again, everybody, and we will see you on Thursday.